Good evening, members, and good evening, officers. Good evening to members of the public and to all those watching us on the YouTube channel, to our Planning Committee meeting this evening on the 17th of October. We'll start off with apologies for absence. I think Councillor Beavis is on her way, hopefully. So we have apologies this evening from Councillor Diamond, who is being substituted by Councillor Thorogood, and also Councillor Hayes, who's been substituted by Councillor Bowers. But otherwise, we should all be here, subject to Councillor Beavis arriving. So, just to let members of the public know that we are today, for the first time, operating from an electronic agenda. So, hopefully, just bear with us if it takes a little bit of time for us to get to the correct page. So I'll now move on to item 2 on the agenda, which is declarations of interest. Do any members wish to declare the existence and nature of any disclosable pecuniary interest, other pecuniary interest, or non-pecuniary interest relating to the items on the agenda, having regard to the code of conduct for members? So before I start, we'll make a joint declaration on behalf of us all in respect of Councillor Mary Cunningham, who is speaking this evening. She is a fellow member of this council, and I will also make a declaration myself in respect of item on the agenda 5H, which is the item at Belsham Walter. Belsham Walter is in my ward, and I know one of the speakers and also a number of the objectors who have written in on this application, but I have not discussed this application with them, so I will remain and vote. Councillor Spray.
Thank you, Chairman. I'll declare an MPI on the first 6 applications, that's 5A to 5F, Woodhouse Farm Cottage, Woodhouse Lane, Kelvedon, only because this is on the Rivenhall incinerator site, and I am the BDC representative on the Rivenhall liaison group, where this has come up from time to time, but I have never discussed or commented on it, so I'll remain and vote. Thank you.
Councillor Hooks.
I need to declare a non-pecuniary interest on application Rear of Springfields, which is 5K on our agenda. Although I have made no comment on this particular application, I have been heavily involved with the previous application on this land. I've also commented on, as chair of Reign Parish Council, on the neighbouring reserve matters application that gives access to this application as well. So I will leave the room for that item. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Hooks. Councillor Abbott.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. I'm going to make the same declaration as I have before on item 5I, the Bellway site in Rivenhall. Although I don't think I've made any particular comment about this specific part of the application. I believe I'm predetermined, as I strongly objected to the overall development, proposed refusal here, and then spoke at the appeal against the application, so I'll leave for that item. And then the same declaration as Councillor Spray for 5A to 5F. I'm a member of the Rivenhall Airfield Waste Site Liaison Committee as a member of Rivenhall Parish Council, where these applications have been mentioned, but I've been very careful not to express a view one way or the other on the merits of them, so I'll stay for that.
Thank you, Councillor Abbott. That brings us to the end of the declarations of interest. We'll now move on to item 3 on the agenda, which is the minutes of the previous meeting. Members, the minutes of the previous meeting on the 26th of September have been circulated. Could I have someone to remove those as a correct record of the meeting? Thank you, Councillor Ritchie. And a seconder, please. Councillor Holland, thank you. All those in favour of signing the minutes? Thank you, members. That now brings us on to item 4, public question time. We don't have any speakers this evening on matters of general interest, so we will move now on to item 5, which is which are the planning applications. I've already notified officers and members, but I'd like to tell the members of the public that we are going to change the order of the agenda, because we don't have speakers. It's a very long agenda this evening. We don't have speakers on every item, so I'd like to bring the items where we have speakers to the front of the agenda, and the items where we don't have speakers to the end of the agenda. So to try and enable you to leave earlier than you would have done otherwise. So the order for this evening will be, the first application to be heard will be, to be dealt with will be the application at Hatfield Peveril, will then be followed by the application at Belsham Walter, then the application at Rivenhall, and then the application at Springfields, near land south of Springfields, Braintree. Those four. We will then move the items on Woodhouse Farm Cottage, Kelvedon, and deal with those. And then the last item will be the light item at Church Lane, Braintree. I hope everybody's content with that. So we will now move on to the first item to be dealt with this evening, which is item 5G on the agenda, which is application number 23/00994 full, which is land northeast of the Vineyards, Hatfield Peveril. We don't have any speakers this evening on that item, so I will move to the presentation, which is going to be given by Catherine. And members, let me find the page now. That is on page 121 of your agenda. So if members would like to try and locate that, I will just try and scroll down to that myself. Just give me a second, Catherine, and then... Okay, fire away. Thank you.
Thank you, Chairman. So the application is for the creation and use of a temporary construction compound, and that includes access to the A12, car park, storage yard, welfare and office facilities, etc., landscaping. And these works are required to support the enabling works for the A12 Chelmsford to A120 widening scheme, which is currently the subject of a development consent order under consideration by the Planning Inspectorate. And the site itself is land northeast of the Vineyards, Hatfields, Peveril. So this is the site here, marked in red, and you can see it has access to a road, a pull-in road here, which is leads to the Wellington Overbridge and into Hatfield Peveril itself. So you would enter the site in this direction, and then come out in this direction directly onto the A12 slip road. To the left of the site of the screen here, you can see this is the Vineyards, which is a small group of dwellings, the closest of which is Rock Cottage, which I believe is 10 metres from the site boundary. You'll also note this dotted line here is the public right-of-way, which you access from the Vineyards here, and then travel across the fields, and you can just clip there. See, it's not within the site itself, but it just comes to its sort of northwestern corner, and then passes over, which is the Great Eastern Main Line railway line here. So this is the general arrangement plan provided for the site. The main office complex would be in this location here. This is the welfare block and a storage office here. The car parking area would be a large car parking area set out, but the use of it would be controlled in order that only 100 spaces were available for the purposes of this permission. The wider car parking area would be utilised when the DCO, or if the DCO were granted, and then the DCO itself would supersede all development on this site, as it has it's completely duplicate in that, but it does cover the wider area as well, which is why this access road has been provided, because that leads then to further works which are associated with the DCO, but obviously wouldn't be used under this particular permission. And over in this corner of the site, you can see that there's a storage yard proposed and a drainage attenuation pond. Bunding is proposed in this location here, along the boundary with the vineyards, and also in this location here, separating sort of the compound works itself, you know, the facilities, I suppose, with the access road to the storage yard. And if there were any excess soil which needed to be stored, then it could be stored in this location here, far away from the neighbouring properties. You'll just make out the faint line here is the curtilage of a dwelling called Whittam Field, which is a replacement dwelling. It's currently being demolished, but there is permission for a new dwelling in that location. This just gives you an appreciation. Oh, sorry, I don't know what happened there. Appreciation of how the site fits in with the main works themselves as applied for under the DCO. So the blue line really covers the site, some of the site, and you can see that the whole of the surrounding area would be subsumed if the DCO were granted by works, compound, and also borrow pits, etc., and the junction itself, new works here. So the bunds themselves, adjacent the vineyards, they're proposed to be 2 to 3 metres high. The exact height of them can't be specified due to the fact that the slope needs to be controlled dependent on the granularity and cohesiveness of the soil. But essentially they would provide storage for the topsoil on the site. They would provide a noise attenuation function and visual mitigation. They would be seeded. And this is the fencing plan showing you that the site would be sort of essentially fenced, therefore sort of preventing incursion from protected species once that fence is up, which is likely to be early on in the phasing, and just gives you a general approach. So we've just got chain link fence here and a palisade here as the inner compound. Main office and complex and welfare blocks, they're essentially temporary units which would be joined together with solar panels on their roof. And just demonstrating that site, there is a comprehensive site drainage strategy which would drain all of the site runoff onto this attenuation pond, which then doesn't discharge. It would be, the water within it would be used for washing down vehicles, etc., etc., or you know, if it became too full, then that would be taken off site. So a revised tree vegetation and tree plan has been provided. So the reason it was revised is because originally the access visibility display was quite large, and we have negotiated with National Highways, the applicant, to reduce that to the minimum possible, which is still acceptable to the local highway authority, and that means that the hedgerow, the site frontage could all be retained. However, you'll note that there is hedgerow within the site and a group of trees here and here, scattered trees, which would need to be removed because they're entirely, subsumed by the development. You'll also note that there is a hedgerow boundary here with a veteran tree, and you'll see on the other plans that there's another hedgerow here, and that the site respects a buffer to those features. So this is just showing you a close-up of the visibility display and the access itself, and you can see sort of where there's an existing gap in the street scene there, and that tree is this tree here, so that existing gap would be utilised. And the reinstatement enhancement plan would be invoked if the site were, if the DCO were not granted, for example, or not implemented, then there is a requirement via the conditions that the site would be reinstated under this permission, and in that instance then it would have to be consistent with this plan, which shows a wildflower mix here, intermittent trees and shrubs, and reinstated agricultural land here. If the DCO were granted and were implemented, then the reinstatement works would be cared for under the DCO, whereby they would be part of a more comprehensive scheme, which the planning inspectorate has responsibility for considering. So this is the existing site access here. You can see there's sort of a berm of hardcore really, sort of marking it, and beyond that there's some scrub. So this is really looking at it into the site. So this is the group of trees that would be potentially lost, and this is Rock Cottage, I believe, at the vineyards, so the closest residential property. This is the access to the vineyards, and you can see then the road, which then turns into the A12 slip road, and this site is sort of, you know, back here. This is the site boundary. This is a view down the vineyards. This is Rock Cottage here, and this is the site. And this is a view from the footpath, sort of in that northwestern corner of the site. Again, Rock Cottage here, that sort of area of scrub which I pointed out to you previously, and the extent of the site sort of extends in this direction here and encompasses this field. And again, this is a view looking directly at the site, sort of east towards the A12. So you can see the eastern boundary of the site here, and the field and site in this location. So as we've got quite a busy agenda this evening, I won't go into all the details. Obviously the key considerations have been set out in the report, and if members want to ask any questions, they're more than welcome to do so. But I won't sort of give everybody a detailed account. Suffice to say that we do now have comments from Landscape Services in relation to the proposal, and I'll read you their conclusion. The proposal suitably limits the effects on the existing landscape features. There is opportunity on the site to replace landscape features lost as a result of the development. Further details are required with the arboricultural method statement to ensure timings of operations are clearly defined, overseen and inspected. The appointment of a suitably qualified project arboricultural consultant is required, who will be responsible for monitoring the implementation of the approved tree protection plan, along with details of how they propose to monitor the site, for example, frequency of visits, key works, etc., and how they will record their monitoring and supervision of the site. Landscape Services supports the approval of the proposed application with the following conditions recommended. So then they include the same condition that I have proposed for you or recommended for you in the report in relation to an arboricultural method statement submission and overseeing of the site by a suitably qualified professional. And they have also asked for a landscaping scheme. They've requested the standard condition, but officers consider that that is covered by condition 18 for site reinstatement, and that would then encapsulate all the timings of the works, provision of irrigation, replacement of plants, etc., as well. So that would all be part of it if the DCO didn't supersede it effectively. So yes, we've got quite a few conditions recommended, so if you have any questions, don't hesitate to ask. And the only correction which I have is that in your reports, the last condition is numbered number 19, but it's actually 18. But the ordering of the conditions and their content, their text, doesn't affect that at all. It is literally just the number that's attributed to it. So recommendation is for approval subject to Section 106 agreement, which would cover mitigation for skylarks.
Thank you, Catherine. Members, Councillor Basrint.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Would the officer like to comment on the comments that Hatfield Peveril Parish Council have made, especially under number 2? Thank you.
So if you just bear with me, because I think we obviously don't have a hard copy of the agenda anymore.
If it helps, it's as a precondition to any planning consent, it is imperative that the surface of Wellington Bridge be repaired and relaid in order to make it fit for purpose. And the parish council, understandably, are concerned for the residents of the vineyards, but it's more on Wellington Bridge, the state of the Wellington Bridge. Thank you.
No, I appreciate that. I have addressed, or I've tried to address all of the parish comments within the report, so that there is a paragraph in the report which addresses this, and essentially, in short, the Wellington Overbridge is the responsibility of the local highway authority, and the local highway authority are required to obviously repair the bridge if it becomes unsafe, or the surface of it. So if they are made aware of that, then they are obligated under law to deal with it. So I can't then obviously expect the developer to take that on, given that is covered by alternative legislation. So it wouldn't be justified for us to apply any controls as suggested by the parish council in this instance, because it's already covered elsewhere.
Thank you. Then I think our advice to Hatfield Peveril Parish Council would be to contact their county councillor and forewarn them about the state of the bridge and what could happen to the bridge, and then they've given notice then. Thank you.
Quite right. Yes, if they notify the highway authority of the current condition of the bridge and any further degradation of its surface.
Councillor Abbott.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Very familiar with these proposals in the sense that all of us who represent wards along the A12 were consulted by National Highways about the A12 scheme. So we've been through many drawings over many years. As members will have seen, during construction and afterwards, this is going to be yet another very profound effect on the rural environment in this area. Basically, all the land, pretty much, between Witham and Hatfield Peveril is going to be churned up to some extent. This application is obviously complicated by the fact that it's separate to the DCO, and we don't know the outcome of the DCO yet. So that makes our task a little bit tricky. My main concerns are very similar to the parish council, and particularly for the residents of the properties nearest it. I would suggest that this could have a profound impact on the people who live close to it. I've seen the conditions in terms of noise and dust, which are going to be really important, but anyone who's been near a major construction compound, also one that might be working at night, knows what we're talking about here: dust, noise, light pollution. And we're going to lose more trees and hedges. They may be mitigated in the future, but it all feeds into the same losses which are accumulating over the district as a whole. What I wanted to focus on is the so-called lighting strategy, in particular thinking about the residents of the vineyard, but also about the fact that this is a site currently in the countryside. It actually consists of less than one page, which was buried on the planning, design and access statement. I had to look for it, quite hard to find it. And I can only describe it, Madam Chairman, as word soup. It doesn't flow at all in any sense. It's completely illogical. In places they say they're going to do their best to not cause a problem for local people, motorists, etc. But then they say they're going to have some 24-hour lighting. They're going to light the entire perimeter, so that would be within a few metres of the cottages. They're going to have tower lights. They're going to have this lights and that lights. This is another application that's come before us without any details on what that is, apart from this word soup narrative. So what I'd like to suggest, Madam Chairman, if members are agreeable, is that we beef up, there is a lighting condition, that we beef that up to include our normal references to residential amenity and the night scale and countryside, if that's possible. I think particularly the residential amenity point, because if we just say we're protecting bats, which that currently does, that's good, but I think we need to cover all bases. And I would warn officers from past experience of National Highways compounds, they are a sea of tower lights, white LEDs shining sideways. They take absolutely no interest at all in the local environment. So I think we're going to have to watch this one. But I'll leave that to members if they're willing to accept that. Thank you, Madam Chairman.
Thank you, Councillor Abbott. Would you like to come back on that, Catherine?
Yes, just briefly. So, first thing, obviously, that we can only control the impacts of this particular permission rather than the wider DCO. The lighting condition which is proposed, I think, does make reference to some of those aspects in that when you read the reasons, and it's slightly amended beyond the normal format in order that it specifically addressed the construction phase separately from the operational phases, because obviously the construction phase may well be most of the influence of this planning permission, really, because if the DCO is granted fairly soon, then it may be that this site isn't actually operational for that long. So the construction phase is obviously very important, and we can certainly add in any additional aspects as necessary, but the idea is that we really do examine sort of use of all lighting in connection with construction, even if that is the portable tower lights and everything else, really, in order that it's minimised, which is all we can do in this instance, really, is to minimise impacts.
Can I just ask, the lighting condition is condition 9, isn't it? I mean, are you satisfied that it covers all the aspects that Councillor Abbott was concerned about, particularly the residents?
So the reasons given are to ensure optimum levels of personal safety and prevention of crime are provided, whilst also balancing impacts upon landscape, biodiversity and amenity in recognition of local and national policy objectives, and then it provides further details of those. So I feel it's clear that it does extend beyond sort of bats in this instance. By all means, we're happy to add additional wording as required.
So what I'm basically saying is that the explanation, yes, I agree it covers those, but the wording in the actual condition doesn't quite. So my suggestion is just to add a few more words in so they're mirrored, basically.
So just to clarify, Councillor Abbott, so additional wording to cover residential amenity and night sky. Okay. Thank you. Any other members have any wish to make any comments on this application? Okay, would anybody like to move anything, please? Councillor Spray?
I think I'll just beat Councillor Holland to it. Yes, I'll move officer's recommendation for approval. Thank you.
You seconding?
I'll second.
Thank you, members. So that has been moved by Councillor Spray and seconded by Councillor Holland that we grant this application. All those in favour? Any against? Abstentions? Thank you, members. That application has been granted. Right, our next application this evening is item 5H, which is application number 23/01274 full, which is Clark's Farm, North Road, Belsham Walter. And we do have some speakers on this application. So the first speaker is Ms. Atwood, if you'd like to come to the table, and you have 3 minutes to make your statement. Thank you.
Good evening. I have lived in Belsham Walter for 30 years. The residents are from a range of background and ages, and the houses in the village vary in size. The majority of residents are very concerned by this application, as can be seen by the number of objections that have been lodged. All the more so because the planning restrictions with respect to the existing dog walking facility have been ignored. Noise is one of the main concerns, both during training and in the kennels. This number of dogs, 36, will produce a great deal of noise. As the crow flies, the property is not far from the village, and sound travels very easily in the countryside. Some residents have already found the noise disturbing from the training that's been taking place. Residents who regularly walk in the area are concerned about safety, and a number have changed their regular walking routes to avoid footpaths near the property. They are worried about being confronted with dogs under training, especially those being trained for security purposes. These are being walked along the footpaths on leads, and one resident has already been warned to keep back from an aggressive dog being walked on a lead. Traffic safety is another concern. The road to Clark's Farm and the village is a narrow, single-lane road with few passing places. We have already seen an increase in traffic due to the enterprise, made worse by dogs being trained by being walked on leads along this road. Essex Highways have not objected to the proposal, but their planners do not live in this area and they do not use the road. The disposal of waste has not been addressed in the application, and there are concerns about how this will be done and the problems with odour that may arise. While I can understand,
I'm actually going to stop you there, Ms. Sayers. We've got your statement, written statement. Thank you very much, and we've seen the additional points on there. Thank you. We've just got a long agenda. I think we just need to keep to the time limit. Thank you. So the next person who would like to speak is Mr. Michael Aves. Again, Mr. Aves, you have 3 minutes. Thank you.
Thank you. My wife and I object to the proposed development. We are pleased that the officer's clear, balanced and thorough report recommends refusal. I wish merely to highlight a few aspects of the proposed development. As the officer indicates, the application is rather sketchy, except in the case of the buildings themselves. These would be substantial, and their combined footprint would be roughly 3 times that of the buildings to be demolished. The office or facilities building would be the size of a 4-bedroom bungalow. The kennel buildings each have a footprint of 144 square metres and will be large structures, brick-built and over 5 metres high. Another significant structure is the 1.8 metre high perimeter deer fencing, all 500 metres plus of it. To complete the scheme, a large investment will be required, running to some hundreds of thousands of pounds. To be viable, it would need to be used intensively. Turning to the use itself, the agent's application statement paints a somewhat homely picture of family pets bought during lockdown. It avoids saying that the owners of such dogs are the actual intended market, and indeed it would take many dog obedience classes to show any return on the investment. The intended market is surely commercial customers who have guard dogs or security dogs. The village has already had a foretaste of what this would mean in practice when the so-called dog walking field was being used for training just a few such dogs. These were large and menacing beasts indeed, and barked a lot and loudly. A number of people in the village found their presence intimidating and frightening.
Clark's Farm is not an isolated site. There are several dwellings close by, and the farm lies only a kilometre from the centre of the village, with nothing but open fields in between. The dogs could be heard clearly at many of the properties in the village, and their barking caused much distress. The Environmental Health Officer's consultation response says, there will undoubtedly be impact upon the amenity of the nearest properties, and there is also significant potential for a statutory nuisance to be caused by the proposals by way of noise. What the village has already endured demonstrates this, and clearly up to the 36 dogs at the site, whatever their breed, combined with shouted commands from the trainers, would be utterly intolerable. Although traffic generation is unquantified at present because of the vagueness of the proposal, any more traffic on North Road itself and other narrow roads in the village would be undesirable.
Thank you, Mr. Rhodes. I'm going to stop you there. We've got the rest of your statement. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
The last person to speak on this application is Councillor Jane Walker, who represents the Parish Council. Thank you.
Good evening. I'm Jane Walker of the Belsham Alta Parish Council. I'm delighted to see that the recommendation before you is to refuse the application. The Parish Council objects to the application because of the significant opposition from village residents. The Parish Council held a meeting to provide residents the opportunity to air their views. Approximately 45 people, including council members, attended the meeting. 15 people made statements, all of whom strongly objected to the application. No one expressed any support. Of the 38 written statements submitted to you, only 4 were supportive, none of whom are now village residents. The council fully supports increased farm diversification, but it should be appropriate to the setting. Belsham Alta is a small, quiet village. A large commercial enterprise with residential facilities for training 36 dogs is not in keeping with this village. There were 4 main reasons for the council objecting to the application. Firstly, noise. Clark's Farm is approximately 900 metres from the centre of the village, with few trees between it and the village to absorb sound. It is difficult to see how a residential facility for 36 dogs would do anything other than exacerbate the existing noise created by a smaller number of dogs on the site. Secondly, safety. There are 2 issues here. Firstly, traffic. Clark's Farm is located on a narrow winding lane in a state of poor repair, and the increased traffic from staff, groomers, clients would be dangerous. Secondly, personal safety. There is no indication in the application of the type of dogs that would be trained or what they would be trained for. If it is to be more security or personal protection dogs, there is a concern for public safety. At the Parish Council meeting, several attendees expressed concern with the training operation that was in place, stating it is deterring regular village walkers from using the route past Clark's Farm. This is because the dogs are being walked and trained on the road, the nature and temperament of some of the dogs and the nature of their training.
Thank you. I'll stop you there again. We've got the rest of your statement. Thank you very much, Ms. Clark. Right, members, this application is on page 161 of the agenda, and I think the presentation is going to be given by Jack.
Thank you very much, Chair. Evening, members. The application for consideration here is for the change of use of agricultural land to dog training facilities, as well as the erection of kennel buildings and a office/vet/grooming building. So firstly, contextualise the application for you. We're in the northern reaches of the district, countryside location. The map before you that you can see, the blue outline is the wider area of holding under the ownership of Clark's Farm. Our actual site is within the site edged inbred. One thing I will just clarify, you may, some of the speakers touched on it as well, there was a previous application that was granted for a dog walking facility. That is in this location, so as you can see, it's a smaller area, smaller field. It's on the other side of the farmstead, separated by buildings, so the reference to the dog walking field Although they're both connected by being associated with canine activities, they are effectively separate from each other geographically. So our actual site area, you've got the wide site edged in red, the majority of which would be changed use to what's described as a dog training facility, and the actual building development works are in the south of the site there. You can see 3 narrow lines, which are the kennel buildings, and an L plan, which is the office grooming vet building. This plan shows the layout, so the large rectangle on the right there, that's an existing farm building. As you can see, the kennels would be built on the flank. They're generally narrow structures with 12 kennels each with a run at the front. The L plan building, in the subsequent slides, they'll show the layout. But just to continue with the kennels, fairly functional buildings, quite narrow, as you can see, organised as such. They measure about 24 metres in width and 6 metres in length and over 5 metres in height. The office building, we'll call it, in its L plan form, would look like this on the outside. Again, a very simplistic appearance. Inside would provide a reception area, a kitchen and washroom for members of staff, a vet's room and a rest room. A few pictures of the site. So the gable that you can see sort of in the background behind the vegetation is Clark's Farm, from which the farmstead derives its name. It's a Grade 2 listed building. The pond feature is shown on the location plans. Our actual development, so if you was to turn right from the previous image, you'd see the site of where that L plan building is going to go. As you see, it would replace this existing structure, quite dilapidated in its appearance, so that would be removed for the office building. Looking beyond that, this is the wider field that would be changed use into a dog training facility. You can see along the northern perimeter of the site, it's quite a dense line of trees, and as it starts to head to the east, you can see that kind of breaks up, but the field is still very much contained by the established field perimeters. Continuing on our turn, there's existing buildings that would be removed to facilitate where the kennels are proposed. If you recall the site layout, the building you can see on the right was that large rectangular existing building. As you can see, the buildings that would be removed for the kennels are generally quite dilapidated, and their reuse would require a lot of repair, essentially. And these are some views of the wider farmstead, just so members can see how the wider farm operates. So that building you can see there, the kennels would be on the other side of it, so you can help contextualise it. This is a few images that were taken. This is on the 8th of August when officers visited the site of the existing dog walking field. As you can see, there's a perimeter deer fence to prevent dogs from escaping. At the time of the visit, there was training equipment on the site, and this doesn't have consent to be used as a training facility. I'm not sure at this present time if that has been removed, but it was there at the time, and that is being dealt with separately from this application. But effectively, the goings on at that dog walking field aren't necessarily relevant to this application, given that it's on the other side of the farm. So, in summary, as set out in the report, the principal development is not acceptable as there's no policy precedent for a new commercial venture within the countryside. Although the local plan does support rural enterprise, LPP7 is quite clear in what it sets out, that this is for the conversion of existing buildings that are of substantial construction and does not cover extensive rebuilds. So new build facilities to provide new commercial ventures don't benefit from that policy. Although the NPPF also talks about rural enterprise and farm diversification, there needs to be clear and unequivocal evidence that this is the right use of land in the right location. Unfortunately, the application has insufficient evidence for us to be able to tell that. There's no business plan which shows how this is going to operate, and there's no viability assessment which shows us how it's going to operate, at what time a profit will be generated, and how that will benefit the farm. Again, building costs to build these structures alone would largely require a large initial output of money, so the actual return It's just not clear from the evidence that we've been provided here. There's also no clear layout of the training facility. That's the wider field, so it's described as a dog training facility, but how that's going to be laid out, if there's going to be externally stored equipment, where that goes, etc., it isn't provided. All in all, the lack of evidence does not provide the clear justification for the loss of agricultural land within the countryside. It doesn't provide us the assurance that this is the right use of land in this location, especially with no policy precedent. There's no clear rationale for the provision of as many as 36 number kennels. We don't know why 36, why not a lesser number, which could potentially grow should the business prove profitable. So therefore we have to take 36 as a number and we have to assess it as though then 36 kennels are occupied. In that sense, there's no noise survey, there's no information with regards to odour control or disposal, and for that reason, should we expect that the kennels are to be fully occupied, as raised by our environmental health team, the potential likelihood of noise and odour would be potentially detrimental to neighbouring residential amenity. Lastly, the transport service is described as a pick-up and drop-off service. However, there is a caveat that individuals could visit the site by appointment so that they could view the facility and make sure it's the right place they want to send their dog. It's, as the speaker previously described it, it's unquantifiable. We know that the transport service would be operating. It's very hard for us to enforce a strict schedule of when cars are coming and going to the site. What we do know is that it would materially increase the traffic to this rural site, and for that reason we have concerns. So taking this into account, the recommendation would be for refusal, and I draw the members' attention to the reasons for refusal that are in the appendix of the report. Thank you.
Thank you, Jack, for that very full report. Members, Councillor Bowes-Flint.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. On the back of what the officer's just said in his presentation, do we have no more information? Because I've never heard, and I've worked in the industry, I've never heard a vet's room before. They're either consultating rooms or receptions. So is the veterinary business going to be run separately? Is the groomer's business going to be run separately? Or are they there to only just serve the dogs that are in the kennels? It's very confusing. Thank you.
Thank you. This is the sort of information we would expect in a business plan with how the facility is going to operate. So, as you say, 36 dogs in the kennel. At what point is a vet necessary? Is the grooming an add-on to the package, as it were? I don't have that information in front of me. So, at the end of the day, there is no policy precedent, notwithstanding, for a new commercial venture. But I don't have that specific information, which adds to the concern. Thank you.
Any other members wish to make any comment on Councillor Spray?
Thank you, Chairman. Well, I would agree with the really the conclusions of the officer's report. I think it's concerning that there's no business plan submitted, which we would expect for an entirely new venture of this nature. The buildings that are proposed to be removed, well, they are very dilapidated, and I don't think, we'd be sorry to see those go, but what is proposed to replace them are then just not suitable for this site. They're not in keeping at all. And there's just generally a lack of really quite important information, such as any sort of transport information about how many vehicles you could expect every day to what is a very rural site. So all in all, there's a lot missing and quite a lot wrong with this. And personally, I would agree with the comments made by the officer. But I'll leave it for any other comments at the moment.
Thank you, Councillor Spray. Councillor Beevers, did you want to speak?
Thank you, Madam Chairman. First of all, I live in a very rural locality, and secondly, I'm a dog owner, so I do have a degree of sort of sympathy with the planning application in front of us. And we are looking at rural diversification, in quite a big way in the district, and it's something that I'm quite supportive of, actually, because I think it is really important that we do give flexibility to our local farmers and outbuilding. So seeing diversification isn't anything new for us, and also giving up rural land would be a loss. Well, we need to be a little bit careful because we've given up lots of rural land over the last few years for houses, and I'm a bit uncomfortable with that actual comment going back, actually. All that said and done, I do feel that there is a lack of information, and it seems to me almost as if the scheme's sort of been helicoptered in, and one would like to hope that there was some growth in the business first. I'm a bit confused as to what's already there and what seems to be taken away, and the fencing's clearly already there, so there must be a structure of some sort of business, or there must be something going on there. And I think it's quite important how we go back to the applicant on this, because what are we actually saying? I know clearly the recommendation this evening is refusal, but the applicant, I would suggest, would be coming back, and you would be advising the applicant. So although I feel at the moment that we can quite rightly say that the scale of this is too large and would have a detrimental impact, I don't think we're saying not at all. I think we're saying go back and have a look and come back to us. I think that's what we're saying. I just need a bit more clarity from the officers first before I was going to move anything. Thanks, Chairman.
Thank you for your comments. With respect to the first point you raised, when we talked about giving up land, I think my comment was that the loss of agricultural land can be accepted where the benefits are evident in the application. To some degree here, we've got a number of material considerations, such as the potential for noise, not least the fact that there's no policy precedent for this type of application. So my view is that giving up that vast amount of land for something that doesn't have a policy precedent and potential harms would essentially, it causes concern in my judgment. But with respects to what we're expecting going forward, mainly obviously it would be the lack of information would need to be addressed, but ultimately it needs to deal with the core principle that there is no policy precedent necessarily for a new commercial venture requiring new buildings. The policy is quite clear that it needs to be through the conversion of existing buildings without substantial rebuilding, and that's the best way that the policy sets out. So, it would need to be clear and unequivocally a benefit, but ultimately we can't ignore things like what Environmental Health have said about the potential for noise to disturb neighbouring amenity, and we've heard from speakers as well that this has already been experienced. So going forward, you'd need to address what's been highlighted as a lack of information, but also it would need to be considered, is this the right location for this form of diversification, or would a more sympathetic form of diversification be better to support the unit, I would say. Thank you.
Chris, you'd like to add something?
Thank you, Madam Chairman. So just to add to what Jack's just explained there, I think there's 2 points, Councillor Beavis, just to reiterate as well. So first of all, given the lack of information that we've got before us, obviously the applicant can go away and seek to try to address that, but that in itself may actually raise some further issues. So the lack of information, particularly around noise, may mean that there could be some mitigation measures, but whether or not those mitigation measures are actually practical, effective, and then what the impact of that is, that would all have to be assessed. So the application before you is clear. I think we're quite clear in our assessment in terms of the content of it, and as with all applicants, we would encourage them to speak to us through our pre-application service before submitting an application. So I think that's the message tonight from officers in terms of going forward that if a revised proposal is being considered, come and speak to us through that process. But as Jack's underlined, there is a policy basis and there is a lot here to potentially address, and that may be, from our perspective, insurmountable, but we'd be happy to have that conversation.
That's Richie.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Just to clear up one point, yes, we have built some residential houses in a rural location, but they've been built on policy. And I think there's some clear evidence here where this isn't so much siding on that area. Also concerned around the best and most valuable use of land, and the fact that even though it's a small parcel of land, it's still being lost to diversification that it doesn't seem to chime with what we've done in the past here within the district with different farm shops, microbreweries, biomass, etc. There are a lot of diversification routes that can be taken that actually do have a profit-making side to it too. Then lastly, on the comment of noise, you only need to take into account one single dog in a residential area and the amount of noise that that can make and the enforcement that we are prepared to take on a single dog causing noise in a residential area. Now multiply that by 36 times and play that back in a rural setting close to a village and the impact that might have on residents. I absolutely fall on the side of officers' recommendations this evening. Thank you, Madam Chairman.
Thank you, Councillor Ritchie. I mean, this is in my ward, and you can tell from the speakers who've come today and the number of objections that there's considerable concern in the village for justifiable reasons. And I think, as you've rightly pointed out, the issue of, apart from the fact that there's really very little information about precisely what business is supposed to be run here, the fact that there is no information and expert information on what the noise impacts would be, I think is really sort of is a serious reason for objecting to this proposal. Councillor Baslint.
Just if there's nobody else who wants to speak, Madam Chairman, I'm quite happy to move the officer's recommendation. Thank you.
Councillor Ritchie.
Happy to second, Madam Chairman.
Okay, so it's been moved by Councillor Baslint and seconded by Councillor Ritchie that we refuse this application. All those in favour of refusal? Thank you, members. That application has been refused. Thank you. If any... Right, members, that brings us on to our next application this evening, which is application number 5I, which is, the application number is 23/01288/DAC, I'm not sure if that number correct, which is Phase 4, land northeast of Rectory Lane, Rivenhall. That is on page 186. And we do have a speaker this evening, Mr. Spencer. Thank you.
Good evening, councillors. I'm Olivier Spencer from Andrew Martin Planning, and I represent the applicant Bellway Homes. As mentioned at the last committee meeting, outline planning permission was granted earlier this year by a planning inspector for up to 230 homes, SUDs and landscaping at North East Witham Phase 4. Condition 6 of that permission requires a design code to be submitted and approved prior to the submission of any reserved matters application. With that in mind, the applicant has held a series of meetings with the council's officers over the last 9 months, taken part in a members' forum in March, and held separate virtual meetings with the parish council, town council and other stakeholders to help inform the content of the document. A formal application was made in May to seek to discharge Condition 6, and since then further discussions have led to various revisions to the design code. The document currently before you complies with the parameter plans and vision statement approved at the outline stage, and is consistent with the guidance and policy contained in the Essex Design Guide, the Essex Parking Standards and the Braintree Local Plan. The Design Code assesses the existing character of the local area and seeks to interpret and incorporate these design cues within a modern development with 5 distinct character areas. The document sets out general urban design principles, a street hierarchy, pedestrian and cycle movement objectives, and parking principles, as well as guidance on the forthcoming design of the new homes, including their appearance, form, materials and detailing. The code also sets out site-wide landscape principles, information on the intended distribution and quantum of public open space, and a tree planting strategy. Recognising that a separate infrastructure application is likely to come before this committee in due course, the code allows for the provision of a bus-only section of highway through the proposed sports park, or a bus turning loop, depending on how that separate application is determined. If approved, the design code will shape a high-quality, detailed design for the 225 market and affordable homes on this site. While the five self or custom-built plots will be subject to a separate code that will be more focused and helpful for the prospective self or custom builders.
I think I'm going to stop you there, Mr. Spencer. We got your last paragraph. Thank you very much. It was difficult to time your statement exactly. So Neil now is going to do the presentation for us on this application.
Good evening, members. So this presentation is with regards to an application to discharge a planning condition on the outline permission. As members will be aware, usually applications to discharge conditions are dealt with under delegated powers by officers. The reason, as we've set out in the report, for referring this matter to the planning committee is as the committee will be ultimately making the decision on the reserved matters, so the detailed design, which will be informed by the design code, we felt it was only appropriate that members should be able to review and hopefully endorse the design code, so that when they get the reserved matters, that will accord with something that they've had sight of and are comfortable with. So the application relates to Phase 4, which is land north east of Rectory Lane in the parish of Rivenhall, just on the edge of Witham. So the application site, so you can see just annotated there, Phase 1 and Phase 2 to the south. The site is outlined in red. We've got the Rivenhall Oaks Golf Course to the northeast, and got the Rickstones Academy just to the northwest, and to the west of the site, Phase 3, which is also known as the Bluebells development, which is another development by Bellway. So, as you'll have read, there was a number of parameter plans which were approved as part of the outline permission when the inspector granted the permission, so covering matters such as green infrastructure, pedestrian and access movement, vehicular access and movement, and also storey heights. So those are approved, and what we've obviously been conscious of in the development of the design code is to make sure that the code follows through on the principles or the rules that are set by those parameter plans. So there's a number of documents and a number of elements to the code. I won't go through them all because you'll have had a chance to review it in your own time, and it's quite a long document, but just to highlight some of the key elements. So there's a general urban designs principle section which looks at the potential layout and identifies key aspects, so such as where landmark buildings would need to go, tree-lined streets, the approach that might be taken there, but sort of building on a level on the parameter plans that we had approved on the outline. Another element is the street typology plan, so looking at those different roads, the highway network within the development, looking at the different types of streets, so that it needs to consider things such as capacity, so how the roads are going to be used, the volume of traffic, the types of vehicles, but also trying to introduce something which is legible, so residents and visitors will be able to navigate through, understand where they are in the development, that not all streets look the same. And then just to build on that, sorry, wrong sequence on the slides, which was my fault, we've actually got sections which show how those different streets would be formed. So at the top there you've got the avenue, which is the road which runs through the centre of the site, which is where the bus route would go through. So you can see here we've got a wide carriageway in the middle, got generous verges on either side, which allows for tree-lined streets, and then a footway and a shared pedestrian and cycleway on the other side. And then because of the type of road and the type of traffic on it, the properties are accessed by segregated or separate, I should say,
driveways in the front of their properties, so you're not sort of pulling directly on and off with lots of different driveways to access properties. And then there's a number of different road types as we move down through the hierarchy, so slightly lower order roads, so you can see, I won't go through all of those, but you can see there's a number of different types. So we've got streets which allow for perpendicular parking, where residents will be able to park there or have their parking spaces in front of their properties, but still building in landscaping to break up those streets and allowing for tree-lined streets. Moving down to the sort of bottom right-hand slide where you've got a private drive, so that's the sort of lowest order road, so the narrowest carriageway just to the fronts of people's properties. But you can see with each of the streets there's an annotation to show the widths of the carriageways or the permissible widths of carriageways, and also depths of front gardens. So we're sort of coding to allow for that, so that when we get the reserved matters and the layout in, we've got very clear, the developer will have very clear understanding of what the council's expectations are. So just move back up, sorry about jumping around the slides. So there's also character area studies which have been done of Witham. This is one of the areas which was revised following the initial submission. So further detail has been added to these. So I won't go through all of these, but just as an example, this is the Avenue character area which has been studied within Witham, which many members will be familiar with. So you can see there's various photos there showing the carriageway, the wide verges, the trees, the types of houses, so detached, semi-detached, architectural features, and so on. So that's part of the study of Witham. So we're looking to draw out from those the best and the positive aspects of different areas, and then applying those to character areas within the new development. So this is a further bit of the character study. So it's just noting typical wall materials, so brick, render, roof materials, detailing of things like eaves, barge boards, sills, headers, all of those sorts of things. So we're looking at not trying to capture everything, but trying to capture the key characteristics of that area, of that particular area. And then what the design code does is pull that forward into proposed character areas. So just taking the avenue, which we just looked at on those previous slides. So what the code does is identifies where the avenue is going to go, so the dark stretch down the middle where the principal road's going to be. So we've got some sort of headlines, if you like, bullet points in terms of what the key characteristics are going to be of that street type. And then building on from that, we've got a page which talks about building details, or a table which looks at building details. So we're starting to talk about what types of materials will be appropriate in terms of walls and roofs, sort of eaves details, window headers, sills, so on. So you can see the detail there. So this is informed by the character area study of the avenue. There's a number of different areas which were studied within Witham, and different elements of that character have been drawn through to inform the character areas for this development. And what this drawing tries to do, or this illustration of a street scene is doing, is it's sort of drawing out where some of the features that we can see in this street scene, which is how the architect or the designer is starting to envisage the avenue looking, where some of these features have come from. So you can see they've referenced it back to the photographic study of the avenue, so you can see quite clearly and at a glance where those character features are coming from. So there's a palette of materials which is proposed across the whole site, which is just set out there. And then, as you heard at question time and we will have read in the document, there's 5 character areas in total. So I've just talked in the presentation just about the avenue through the centre here. But you can see we've also got a parkland character area here, looking towards Rectory Lane and the park that runs down here. We've got a countryside edge, which is sort of running around, facing towards the golf course, but also the some of the open spaces. And then we've got this internal spaces character area as well, the sort of buff colour. And then the recreation ground, we've got a different character area there, looking towards the sports pitches. So these are just some 3G images to give some illustrations of how the different character areas might look in 3D street form. So you can see at the top there we've got the avenue featured again, and then moving down we've got the parkland and the recreation ground. So this is the
sort of strong built form, which some members might remember from the vision document, which was included within the outline planning permission. So that's sort of translated forward into their character area here. And then the other two character areas are just shown there. So it's the internal spaces and the country edge, just to give an impression of what sort of spaces and streets they will be. Just in terms of quick update, we did have a late holding objection from the Highway Authority just on two very minor technical points on one page of the document. The applicants very quickly amended the document, and it hasn't changed the street at all, it's just changed the area, or it just notes the area which will be adopted. So quite a minor amendment, but we've done that for clarity and to satisfy the Highway Authority. So just in terms of the recommendation, if we are, if members are minded to approve tonight, we would be approving version J of the document rather than the one that's on your papers. And I think the fact that we're on version J indicates how much hard work has gone into it from the developer. I think they have been pushed hard. The vision document made it clear that they were committed to raising the game in terms of design and quality. And I think from an officer point of view, we certainly feel they've responded through pre-app discussions and during the course of the application as well. So we're comfortable that the design code builds on the parameter plans and the vision statement, which were approved with the outline planning permission. We think it successfully identifies some of the positive attributes and characteristics of Witham, not all obviously, because they're many and varied, but some of them. And the design code successfully establishes a set of rules which will help and guide and form the reserved matters which will come through. So we believe that the design code is a really important step in ensuring that the detailed layout and appearance which will come forward in the reserved matters and which will become before members in due course will be a development which is of a high quality. So officers recommend approval. What we have, just to clarify, in terms of what we're asking you to approve, the design code that we've got covers the majority of the site, so it covers the 225 dwellings, which will be the market and the affordable housing. It also covers the open space, so the vast majority of the site. What it doesn't cover is the 5 self-build plots. The reason for that is we think it actually will be more helpful for people buying the self-build or custom-build plots to have specific guidance for those 5 plots, which is more bespoke, more focused on those, and rather than reading through a longer document, we'll make sure we capture the important elements of this and apply it to the self-build and the custom-build plots, but they will have their own guidance. So we're recommending partial discharge of the condition based on the design code. There'll be a further design code to cover the self-build and custom-build plots. Officers consider, because those plots would come forward, they wouldn't come to planning committee for determination. We think it would be appropriate for officers to deal with the self-build and custom-build design code under delegated powers. So we wouldn't be proposing to bring that back, but we think by bringing this document, which covers the vast majority of the site and certainly the elements of the application, which members will ultimately be assessing through reserved matters, we think that's appropriate. So hopefully that's covered it and given you a flavour of the design code and sort of builds on your understanding of things. But obviously, as always, if there's any questions, I'll be happy to take those. Thank you.
Thank you, Neil. Members? I'd like to make a comment on the Councillor Spray.
Thank you, Chairman. I wasn't necessarily expecting to go first, but I'm quite happy to. Thank Neil for his presentation. As he alluded to, I think it's obvious the amount of work that's gone into this. I think there seems to have been a fair amount of sort of toing and froing with the design code, with some amendments along the way, which is all to the good, because it appears to me a lot of care has been taken over the layout and the designs and to achieve a high standard. I know that we on this planning committee and for a long time have looked for developments, whether they are very small or developments of this size, to be of a high quality. We like to see variation in house styles, and we like to see good planting and room for cars, but without them necessarily being the dominant feature anymore. And I do think this does achieve that. So I think congratulations go to officers. Neil, I know, is leading on this, and also to the agent and the developer for bringing us something which I think is a good quality and will provide, you know, very good housing, which we do need in this district. And I hope, you know, if it gets approval and goes ahead, homes that people will be happy to live in. So thank you, Chairman. I'll leave it at that for the moment.
Thank you, Councillor Bray. Councillor Schwer.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Could I just ask officers, not sure if this is an appropriate place in discussing the design code tonight, but I haven't seen any reference to renewable energy or solar panels on the design code. So I just wonder whether because I would presume that EV charging points would come under reserved matters later anyway, but perhaps the officers could just give me an indication of if this is possible at this stage, or if it isn't, where it would be appropriate to be able to talk about, and perhaps, because I think it's really important that actually in the design code the potential of renewable energy for those houses going forward is considered.
Yeah, thanks, Councillor Schwer. So you're right. We haven't specifically referred to those elements within the design code. There is a condition on the outline permission which covers EV charging, which the inspector sort of challenged us on why we were doing that, and we made the point that it's really important, just as you've said, for the reasons, and to make sure it fits in and works. But also there was a commitment in terms of solar panels on roofs, so it was a slightly unusual application in that sense, that there was a number of really positive things that were offered as part of the outline application. So although we haven't coded them, they're sort of covered through, or those particular points anyway, are covered through the outline permission. So hopefully that allays your concern.
Any other members wish to speak? I'll just make a comment myself. That I like the legibility of the streets is really has been carefully considered. Particularly like the avenue. I'm not sure we've seen that before, but to have a road separated from a pavement with the grass in between, and having that wide spacing on the central spine going through development, I think will give a real enhanced feel, and certainly the reference back to the avenue within Witham itself, and to try and tie this development to the existing built form in Witham, so certainly the most prominent part of it is very welcome. So yes, I think it's good to see that so much work and care has gone into providing what will hopefully will be a high quality development. Members, I don't think anybody else has. Councillor Holland, do you wish to speak? No. Any members like to move officer's recommendation? Councillor Spray?
Thank you, Chairman. Yes, I'll move recommendation.
And second, do I have a seconder? Councillor Holland. Okay, it's been moved by Councillor Spray and seconded by Councillor Holland that we grant this application as partial discharge of condition 6. All those in favour? Thank you, members. And just could I just also just check that you're happy for the design code, such as it will be for the plots, for the self-build plots, to be dealt with under delegated power. It seems to be that sensible. They're really happy with that. Okay, thank you very much, members. So that brings us on to our next application this evening, which is application number 5K, application number 23/01880, out land at Springfields, Braintree. And we have... oh, sorry, I'm just going to wait for Councillor Abbott to come back and Councillor Books to leave. So we have two speakers this evening. The first speaker is Councillor Mary Cunningham. Thank you.
Thank you, Chairman. Good evening, members. Firstly, I'd like to acknowledge the developers' reach of their leaflet advertising the exhibition they held at the Old School Rooms in Rain in July to outline their proposed application. They were very diligent in the extent of the area they covered, and an application for a number of affordable and shared ownership homes would be welcome throughout the district, not just in Braintree. However, I have been contacted by a number of residents of Braintree West Ward in respect of this application to support their opposition and concerns to this development, as many feel this is Brook Green by stealth. The site, as part of the larger application known as Brook Green, had permission refused in 2016, and one of the core principles set out in the NPPF is that planning should recognise the intrinsic character and beauty of the countryside. It states that the planning system should contribute to and enhance the natural and local environment by protecting and enhancing valued landscapes. It is very evident from the proposed layout of the site that this would be contradictory to the NPPF policy because of the very close proximity of this development to the Flitch Way. These concerns are confirmed by the number of residents making representation to BDC and to the exhibition in Rain in relation to the detrimental effect this will have on the Flitch. The concept master plan showing the proposed layout of the development indicates very little parking on site, and the developer has been keen to stress in the transport assessment the proposal for residents of the new development to walk, cycle or use public transport to minimise car use. The reality is that as local residents, we know that the Flitch Way in winter, in periods of heavy rain, is not always easily accessible for cycling or walking and is unlit, so is not accessible after dark, which in winter would not allow cycling or walking at the end of a working day. The bus service is infrequent, so it is inevitable that the residents will need and use cars. It is around the road infrastructure of the immediate area that I and many residents living in close proximity to the development have the greatest concern. And this is a concern shared with residents in the wider area of Braintree West and Rain Village. The increased amount of planning applications passed and pending for Rain Road and Podsbrook has and will continue to put increased pressure on Rain Road, particularly around the Springwood Junction. The issues around traffic congestion at Galleys Corner are felt in Rain Road as vehicles try to avoid the congestion there and choose the alternative route along Podsbrook, funnelling into the Springwood roundabout in Rain Road.
Councillor, I'm going to stop you there.
Okay.
We've got the rest of your statement there. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. The next person, the last person to speak this evening is Mr. Kitson Keane, who's from the Home Group. Thank you. Again, 3 minutes. I'm afraid I'm going to be strict this evening.
Good evening, members. My name is Kitson Keane, Director of Development at Home Group, speaking on behalf of the applicant. Home Group are the preferred delivery partner for the proposed 100% affordable housing scheme at the land south of Springfields, north of Flitch Way. Home Group are a registered provider of affordable housing across the UK, and we have 393 homes owned and managed within the district. Over the last 5 years, we've built over 7,500 homes, and as a large developer, we have ambitious plans in our new strategy. We're committed to build and maintain safe, excellent, quality and affordable homes in mixed tenure communities. The proposed development will deliver a 100% affordable housing scheme comprising 74 affordable dwellings. The delivery of 100% affordable housing is a significant benefit to Braintree, with 59 of those dwellings being dedicated to shared ownership. The scheme makes an extremely positive contribution to first-time buyers and existing and new residents desperately trying to get on the housing ladder. The Council delivered 288 affordable homes last year, and this site is offering 25% of last year's affordable housing delivery in one development. This is a significant social benefit to existing and future local residents of Braintree and represents a substantial contribution to addressing the district's affordable housing need and the shortfalls in the short and medium term. It also makes a positive contribution to the district's overall housing requirements, where Braintree are not currently meeting their assessed housing need. We made it clear that we will not only set affordable rents at local housing allowance levels, we will also seek to introduce eligibility criteria for the proposed shared ownership homes, helping to release rented accommodation across the district, prioritising those local residents who live and work in Braintree, and working with the council to target any additional priority groups. If this planning application is approved, these homes will very quickly help meet the identifiable needs of local people who require good, quality, affordable homes. As one of Homes England's strategic partners, this scheme will be grant funded and bring that into the community as part of the viability of this project. It is therefore important that members understand the substantial benefits provided by this 100% affordable housing for the district and its residents, and give weight it deserves when arriving at your decision tonight. Such benefit clearly outweighs any perceived impact of landscape and character as an edge of settlement development, with the impact of the overall landscape considered to be limited, with visual impacts being localised and not far-reaching. Whilst the current design ensures that there will be no risk to overlooking or loss of privacy,
Thank you. I am going to stop you there, but we have got the rest of your statement, which has already been circulated. Thank you. Now I will pass over to Neil's doing his presentation on you, Neil. Thank you.
Thank you. So this is an outline application with all matters reserved except for access for the erection of 74 affordable residential dwellings. But it's just important to stress that all matters are reserved except for access, because there is quite a lot of material which is provided with the application which shows designs and layout and so on. So it's very important the members have that in mind when they start off. So this site is land south of Springfields in Braintree. So you can see it's a triangular shaped site. So you've got the Flitch Way which runs right across the bottom. Over here, this development, although it's shown here in layout, this has outline planning permission but not a detailed approval. This is the site referred to as Gilder Terrace, or land south of Gilder Terrace. This is Gilder Terrace here on Rain Road, and obviously Rain Road up here, and then obviously coming back in towards the town, we're coming back towards Braintree and the Springwood Drive roundabout. So just in terms of site context, just very quickly, you can see the black line denotes the current settlement boundary, the Flitch Way across the bottom. The red dotted line is a public right-of-way which runs just outside the site to the east. And then moving through, so these are the applicants, or part of the applicant's submission. So you can just see a sort of a drawing showing site topography. So you can see there is sort of quite significant falls to either side, sort of as you perhaps wouldn't be surprised to see, quite close to the river, which flows just beyond the public right-of-way further to the east. But you can see you've got sort of 7 metres sort of fall across the site in total. Got a flatter area sort of towards the middle, but falls away to either side. As I said, we're only being asked to consider approval of access arrangements. So the access here, the only vehicular access, is proposed through from Rain Road, through, and this is the Spine Road, which is indicated within the reserve matters, which hasn't been approved yet for the Crest Nicholson's development on the Gilder Terrace site, and then obviously comes into the development here. So this is the access for which approval is sought. So concept master plan, which shows how the applicant envisaged the site. So because all matters were reserved, I mean, really with an outline application, the principal purpose of showing a layout like this is to demonstrate site capacity. So, and whether, you know, if the number of dwellings can be provided, whether they can be provided in a sort of appropriate form and context for the particular location of the site and the character of the area. So you can see sort of replicating the triangular nature of the site, road across the bottom with houses with amenity spaces primarily to the sides, and then roads round sort of following. So you've got development which backs onto Springfields here, and backs onto land adjacent to the public right-of-way down here, and then blocks and Gants were sort of shown inside. In terms of the separation at the bottom, this perhaps shows it a little bit more clearly. So this is again the applicant's drawing, so it's showing the topography, so you can see the sort of contour lines across the site, but more importantly I think, or more usefully, shows the area of the buffer, so the landscaped buffer where there had been no built development at the bottom of the site, and also because of the fall of the land where the primary surface water attenuation would be. So you can see this blue area here shows that. So sort of measuring across here, just to give some idea, you're looking at about 18 metres, and then across here you're looking at just under 24 metres. So just to give you a feel for the separation between the Flitchway and the development. So this is a sort of another sort of iteration of the layout, which just sort of tries to show sort of a bit more detail around how that buffer could look or might look. So again, just to give an impression, this members might have noticed this is a slightly unusual attenuation feature that's been suggested here, with a wooden sort of boulevard walkway through to connect out of the site to the public right-of-way. So tree removal, officers are obviously very aware how concerned members are about the extent of tree removal on site. So there already has been some tree removal, which I'll show in the site photos, which sort of the tree line, hedge line here has been punctured already, and then it doesn't reproduce particularly well, but members will have seen sort of these dotted lines on the tree survey from the applicant show the extent of vegetation removal. So the tree report doesn't describe individual trees being removed, but refers to groups of woodland or hedge being removed. So certainly in terms of what's there at the moment, there is a reduction on the boundaries which are shown on the tree plan there. Again, in terms of what's indicated if this layout was to be taken forward. But again, I think this comes to the capacity of the site, that it's already demonstrating that existing vegetation would need to be removed to create a developable area to create this number of dwellings, or on this arrangement anyway. So there were some sections shown again, just to sort of illustrate the relationship of the Flitchway to the site, which you'll have seen from the report and from the objections and representations we've received is a matter of concern from many members of the public. So you can see this is section CC, so this is at this end of the site. So you can see quite elevated here relative to the site. So you'd be looking down on the development. And then this is AA at the top, which is at the other end here, where you're more at level, and then BB in the middle, so slightly elevated. But in terms of the Flitchway, obviously members will be aware sometimes you're walking at level with the land, sometimes you're elevated, sometimes you're in a cutting. So here you're always going to be either broadly at level or going to be elevated. So in terms of, and I think that's quite important in terms of how you would perceive the development, particularly given the proximity of built development to the Flitchway. So just some photos, just to give an impression of the site. So this is looking back across the site, so from the western side towards the eastern side. So these are the sort of tops of the triangle, if you like, and then the Flitchway is just running along here. So this was taken from approximately the point where the access, the vehicular access, would come into the site. So this is part of the northern boundary. So just to give an impression of the vegetation, I shouldn't say, sorry, this is a representative photograph of the vegetation. That tree in the centre of the photo is definitely the best tree within that hedge. The rest of the hedge is more likely to be the stuff sort of to either side. But certainly in terms of the layout, which again isn't for approval, but just to give an indication of some of the issues around capacity, that tree, which is within the application site, is shown as being retained, but being retained within somebody's garden. So that's, that's not the only issue clearly, but just as a sort of point in terms of the photographs, there are issues with the sort of capacity and the evidence that we've been provided to demonstrate capacity. So this is looking back across the site. So this is where the hedge has been punctured. So you can see probably not that long ago where there's been clearance to create the access through. So this is the Gilder Terrace site beyond. And then this is just looking sort of further along just to give a different impression. So looking back across the site. And again, sort of another one there. You can sort of get a slight sense of the rise and the fall. Unfortunately, my photography probably isn't good enough to truly represent that, but that gives some impression of the rise and fall of the land. And then these are some photos just of views from the Flitch Way. So again, I wouldn't wish to say these are wholly representative of the whole way along. It does vary. What I've tried to show here is there are places where the existing vegetation is gappy, and you would have views of the site either at a relative level or from a slightly elevated position. So depending on which ones you were looking at. So whilst that can be mitigated to a degree with time, with planting, obviously there is an impact. And I think certainly, again, given the proximity of development, the planting we would think is probably only going to be partially successful in mitigating the impact on users of the Flitch Way. This is just the footway which runs along the eastern side, so the red dotted line which I showed you on the first plan, just to show what that is. So this is where the footpath ends. So this is just at the back of Springfield. So this is pretty much the back line of the gardens on Springfield. And you can see then we go out into an unsurfaced, unmade, unlit path, which is quite attractive with vegetation at the moment. But again, within the site, where there are some connections shown or potential connections shown through from the site, again, there's been some clearance made already where potential paths would be provided in the future. So we did provide an update today, and apologies that it didn't come out sooner. That was down to me, so my apologies for that. Just to run through that very quickly. So there was a typographical error in paragraph 14.2.5. Unfortunately, probably missed out the most important word in the paragraph, which was not able to accommodate the number of dwellings proposed. So apologies for that. There was an update, or we've provided an update in terms of the highways position. So originally there was a holding objection, which was largely around concerns, or was around concerns about forward visibility and the curved design of the spine road. So the applicant submitted further information, which the Highway Authority have looked at quickly or promptly. They've subsequently considered that's overcome their concerns, withdrawn their objection. So they've now made a recommendation that they have no objection subject to planning conditions and financial contributions and obligations through the 106, which includes a financial contribution towards potential improvement of the Springwood Drive roundabout, but also to the Flitch Way. So that was those. And then just moving on through, we provided some clarification around the housing land supply text. So I'm sure the eagle-eyed members amongst you will have noticed there was some slightly additional text to what we would usually include. So we have said there that the shortfall is relatively modest, which we're quite comfortable with, although we don't usually state that explicitly. We have also said that that shortfall is expected to be eliminated soon. I think what we don't want to over-egg it in terms of members or raise expectations when they're making a decision. So whilst we're certainly working really hard to try and reduce that shortfall and eliminate it as soon as possible, it would be incorrect of officers and for members to consider that we're in a position where we can say it's going to be an evidence, crucially, evidence that it will be eliminated soon. So we just wanted to make that correction or clarification. And then finally, members will have seen or received, I should have said, a number of communications or several communications from the applicant, which has included letters from the planning agent, a letter from the home group from Mr. Keynes, which built on his statement, but also further versions of a proposed site layout plan, design principles document and a CGI. As we've set out in the report, none of those documents have been accepted by the councillor's revised plans and don't form part of the consideration of the application. So that hopefully covers those points. I won't run through this because I'm sure you'll have read the report, but just to say, obviously, there's a clear planning history which we've referenced within the report. So we've referenced what we believe to be the relevant parts of the Brook Green appeal decision and the Gilder Terrace appeal decision. I did want to just make a point about stressing the description of development, where Mr. Keane covered it, and we've covered it in the report. Just wanted to make it absolutely clear for members. The description of development does refer to 74 affordable homes, and the proposal that's before us is that 20% of those are provided as affordable rent. I'm just going to check my numbers. So that's 15 dwellings, and then the remaining 59, so 100%, to make up 100%, will be shared ownership. So all of the homes will be what we would term affordable homes. The affordable rent is a policy compliant level. So if we were just getting a normal, inverted commas, policy compliant amount of affordable housing, that's what we'd usually expect from the development. The difference here is, rather than just providing a relatively small number of shared ownership units as well, the rest of the site is shared ownership. So I just wanted to make that clear. There are benefits, and as we've set out in the report, the delivery of the affordable housing certainly is a significant benefit. We don't try and argue against that, and there are other benefits which we've set out in the report. But equally, there is harm. When we're doing the balance, as we've set out in the report, we consider that the harms would outweigh the benefits. Some of the benefits we also think, as we've said, are sort of questionable in terms of the number of dwellings that could be provided or the mix of dwellings that could be provided on the site. So for those reasons, we are recommending refusal. We are just asking members to be aware that obviously that we did originally have 4 reasons for refusal, which included the highway reason for refusal, which was number 3. So what we are saying is we're recommending refusal, so it's subject to number 1, 2 and 4 of the original committee report, or 1, 2 and 3 as we put in the update report. But hopefully that explains things and clarifies. Thank you.
Thank you, Neil. And I'll hand it over to members. Who would like to go first on this? Councillor Spray again.
Thank you, Chairman. And thank you, Neil, for a very comprehensive presentation. I think one of the issues the committee has with this is that the applicant has submitted some revisions, some information. I know we all had a letter by email last week asking us to take this sort of new information into account, and saying that, you know, as far as they're concerned, it addresses some of the reasons put forward by officers recommending refusal. The thing for this committee is that we have to make a decision based on the information that's in the report before us, and I do think that putting forward revised information at what was actually quite a late stage, I mean, for me, that's something that should happen at pre-app stage during the earlier conversations with officers. It honestly isn't good enough just literally 2-3 weeks before a planning committee to say, well, actually, this is what we'd like to do, and we want the committee to make a decision based on that. We simply, it's not the way it works, Chairman, and we can't do that. We have to look at the information that's in the report and which has come forward as a result of, I have no doubt, many conversations between the applicant and the planning officer. So on that basis, it doesn't appear to me that there is sufficient room on this site for the 74 dwellings. And I know this is an outline application, but just on the indicative plan we had, it looks very crammed. It's quite a block of housing. It doesn't look great, to be honest. It certainly doesn't to me. I appreciate that the highways objection has been withdrawn, but it's also the site itself, right up close to the Flitch Way, not on a on a site that we envisaged development on, and I think would have an adverse effect. So, all in all, I don't think it's satisfactory, and I can only speak as I find in the report in front of us. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Councillor Spray. Any other member wish to speak? Councillor Holland.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I've taken particular interest again in the comments from the public, and it's clear that the Flitch Way and that environment and the countryside there is cherished and an important asset to the community. And I do not believe, based on the report we've seen and the presentation by our officers this evening, that can be addressed. It's quite clear that this development will be very clearly visible from the Flitch Way, that there is not adequate screening, and there is unlikely, even into the medium term, that could be developed on the site. I agree with Councillor Spray. This appears to be a very crammed site. If there's ever a sheep were grazed on there, I don't know, but what I do know is it would look very rammed if this development went ahead. When we look at social benefits, I think the social benefits don't just come in numbers of houses or affordability of houses. We also have to look at what it would be like for people to live in this development. And a development putting together so many similar houses in with similar targeting in such a small space does seem to me to be problematic. So I do believe that the proposal is to overdevelop the site, that it is not appropriately mitigated, that in places I see things which suggest to me that the amenity space for individual houses would be compromised by trees and what have you, which in my belief would not last long if they were detrimental to the homeowners or the people dwelling in those homes. And so for all these reasons, I regard this as a poor quality proposal, and for that reason, I suspect, well, I know I will be supporting the officers. Thank you.
Councillor Ritchie.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. I haven't got a great deal to add, other than the fact I was going to mention that although this is a separate planning application to the Brook Green application, during the appeal process there were some principles set out around why there should be no development around that area. I'm afraid if we were to go back on some of those principles, as the ward member quite rightly pointed out, it's almost building that area by stealth against what had already been laid out by the Planning Inspectorate. Nothing further to add other than I do like the principle of the business model of supplying houses in an area that are 100% affordable and 100% for rent. So trying to end on a bit of a slightly cheery note, the business model and the strategy around that I think is one to be welcomed, and I think if it's in the right place it would certainly add value to members in the district, residents in the district who are looking to get onto the housing chain. Thank you, Madam Chairman.
Thank you, Councillor Ritchie. Councillor Abbott.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Yes, I agree with previous comments that I think the applicant is simply trying to do too much with the available space. And, you know, once again, if this was granted, we'd be seeing a loss of significant amount of habitat in terms of hedges and trees. And I just find it extraordinary, you know, with a site with basically just grass over most of it, that and developers have done this, it's very close to where I live in Silver End, they still have to go into the margins and destroy the habitats. And I'd be very interested to see how they think they can achieve net gain, given the potential losses. But I think the comments made by Councillor Holland as well were well put, that you've got to think about what would this look like for the people who live there. So you're trying to get your 70-odd houses, your space where people could walk, your gardens, street lights, the roads, parking, any landscape planting, all crammed into a very small area with that number of houses. And I just think it would it would be very, very difficult to achieve a satisfactory layout, and I think that's the strongest reason for refusal. Thank you, Madam Chairman.
Thank you, Councillor. But I would say I agree with a lot of those comments. I think, having visited the site myself yesterday, I reminded myself that it's unfortunately it's an awkward shaped site. It's a triangular site with the longest edge being along the Flitch Way, and there is quite a significant drop in levels, which is going to be difficult to accommodate. The thing that struck me was recalling the outline on the Gilder Terrace application, where it was quite clear that there was a real strong desire to create a really good buffer between the Flitch Way and the housing to mitigate the effect on the views from the Flitch Way. So I think it is, whilst a lot of affordable housing is very much to be welcomed and is a significant benefit, I do think this site has problems for that quantum of development. I agree with a lot of members. Would any other members like to make any comment on any further comment? Okay, well I'll pass that over to see if anybody would like to move. So Councillor Holland's happy to move. Officers recommended. Seconded. Councillor Ritchie. So I'll put that to the vote. Councillor Holland has recommended refusal of this application. Seconded by Councillor Ritchie. All those in favour of refusal. That is unanimous, members. Thank you. That now brings us back to the remainder of the agenda. So we shall go back to items 5A, 5B, 5C, 5D, 5E and 5F, which are all relating to Woodhouse Farm Cottage. But before we move on, I'll just wait for Councillor Hooks to come back. Thank you. Right, so members, what we're going to do on these ones is the mixture of full applications and building consent. We're going to have, we've got no speakers on this, as you can see. Fiona is going to do the presentation on this. She's going to do one presentation on all items, and we'll have one debate on all items, and then we will vote on each one separately. So I'll pass over to Fiona. Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, so as outlined, this presentation will cover all 6 applications that are for the Woodhouse Farm complex. So to start with some context of where the site is, so I've outlined it in yellow here. So you can see it's to the northeast of Silver End, and to the south, and to the southeast of Bradwell, and you can see the Bradwell Quarry around it and Coggeshall up in the northeast there. So just a bit of a closer look as to the site itself. So you can see it's encompassed here by the quarry, and it's a complex of listed buildings. And this is just a bit of a better indication of the buildings that are on the site. Now you'll note that in the top corner there is a car park. That's to do with the waste management facility, which is kind of the origin of these applications. So you see there's a number of old buildings here, and each of these applications kind of considers a different area within this complex. So as outlined, these applications have come about from the waste management facility applications, which were considered by Essex County Council, and these required that upon the commencement of development of the integrated waste management facility, that Woodhouse Farm and associated buildings shall be refurbished to a visitor and education centre. And there was also a Section 106 agreement which also required the refurbishment of the Woodhouse Farm complex to include offices, an education centre for the public and an area set aside as a local heritage and airfield museum prior to the commencement of the beneficial use of the waste management facility. So there are a number of applications within this. Some of them are listed building consents and some of them are full applications. So some of them do consider the education centre and the local heritage museum, and then some of them are kind of more ancillary to that. So I'll start in the order on the agenda. So starting with agenda item 5A. So this is a listed building consent, and this considers Woodhouse Cottage, which is to the north of the site, and it considers the repair of the existing roof structure, enclosure, chimneys, first floor ceiling, rainwater goods, and installation of new bat access features. So that's located up in that northern area of the site. You can see it's outlined in yellow there. So that's known as Woodhouse Cottage. So this is it currently. You can see there's a number of bat boxes to the front, but it is in quite a dilapidated state. It's not been used for some time, and it's been boarded up. And I don't think that's the best image of it, but you can see that there has actually been some damage to the roof. You can see the vegetation growing there, and trees have fallen on it recently. So it's not in the best state of repair as it stands. So the proposals seek kind of the repair of the existing features of the property, so it wouldn't be brought back into use as a dwelling as it originally was. It would be used as a bat habitat. So the proposals see kind of the weatherproofing and animal proofing of some of the building, but allowing bat access to the loft space by virtue of there be some openings in the tiles, and the existing bat boxes which were to the front of the building, some of those would be moved to nearby trees, and then obviously the loft space would make up for the loss of some of those bat boxes which wouldn't be suitable for nearby trees. So it considers the repairs to the ceilings, walls, stairs and chimneys, so some internal works and majority external works as well. So in conclusion, the proposals would be acceptable from a heritage and ecological perspective because the building itself is listed, and there's no heritage harm identified, and it is considered that it would be suitable use of the site and appropriate to the age of the building. And therefore on this one, listed building consent is recommended to be granted subject to a number of conditions, particularly ecological mitigation conditions. So that kind of covers agenda item 5A. So just for clarification, we're moving on to agenda item 5B. So this item considers the installation of timber, post and rail fencing, including one pedestrian access gate. So this is located along here. So footpath 8 runs throughout the site. You can probably see it starts down in this corner here and runs up through the site. And this would consider the erection of post and rail fence to kind of either side. So at the moment you can see that there's just terrace fencing that's been erected. To the right hand side in this image there is a moat which runs separating Woodhouse Cottage, which we've just seen, from this footpath. And this post and rail fencing will kind of provide a separation between the public right of way and the private area of Woodhouse Cottage. So the gate would be for private access to the cottage, but the post and rail fence would be about approximately 90 metres long, running along this side. So it'd be quite a classic timber post and rail fence. It'd be stained black. You can see there's the gate details as well. And then on this one as well, so obviously taking into account the setting within a number of listed buildings, then there's been no harms identified as part of the proposal, and officers recommend that planning permission be granted subject to conditions. So then if we move on to agenda item 5C, so this considers the refurbishment, extension and fencing of the existing agricultural steel barn and brick-built lean-to shed to create a workshop and enclosed yard space that can be used by local community groups. That would be within class D2. So this considers this yellow area here. So there's an existing, you can just about see there, it's called the High Barn. And this is its current state. So you can see that there's a brick-built kind of structure to the left-hand side, and then you've got this larger barn building to the right-hand side. It's quite open as it stands with steel framing. So this is looking at it just from the southeast, kind of looking towards it. This path right here that you can see here follows the line of footpath 8. And there's just some more to show you kind of the current state of that brick-built building. And there's that open-sided barn building. So the proposal sees the kind of refurbishment and repair of the existing building on the site. So that would consider the extension of that smaller brick-built shed. So this area here is the existing kind of lean-to brick structure, and then this here would almost mirror it within the high barn itself, and that would be a brick-built structure as well. And then here you've got the high barn would be kind of repaired as necessary, with gates installed onto this, and this would allow community use. The applicant has indicated that it would be more of a workshop type space for local communities to be able to use on a kind of a booked basis. So it would be an arrangement between the owners of the site and the local community groups. So it wouldn't be kind of a public access, it would be more on an arranged basis. So there are areas of things like asbestos on the buildings at the moment, so that would be replaced as necessary. The roofing would be replaced as necessary. And you can see here there's that kind of mirrored brick-built structure. You can see that this would still be quite an open barn-style building, but everything would be kind of repaired as necessary. The lean-to type structure would still be a brick-built structure in line with what says existing. So again, in terms of the setting of the listed building and ecological impacts, no harms have been identified as part of these proposals. So also just to clarify in terms of the use of the site, then that car park that you saw on the previous application, that would be utilised for the community groups that are using this building. So officer's recommendation is that planning permission be granted subject to conditions. So if we move on to agenda item 5D, so this is a listed building consent application, and this considers the feed barn, which I'll just skip ahead, is this one here. So as you can see at the moment, it is more of a kind of a brick-built structure, quite an open structure, and this application considers the consolidation, conservation and repair of the remains of the walls and fabric to the feed barn, and this would be to create a heritage exhibit. So as you'll see, at the moment, you've got kind of the remains of what would have been a traditional feed barn, a 19th century feed barn, and you've got the 20th century additions. You can kind of see the breeze block work to the rear there. So there is very little that does remain of the original feed barns. And then again, you can see kind of the 20th century additions. So obviously this was a historic farmstead, and these remains do indicate kind of the heritage and the evolution of the site as a whole. So the 19th century elements would be retained and repaired, including the brick plinth and the farmyard walls. The removal of the 20th century elements, such as these kind of more blockwork walls, and the kind of the centre, the yard areas would be grass and wildflower to create almost a garden type area. And this would form a heritage exhibit, which would be associated with the next applications that we'll get onto, but kind of in association with the site as a whole as a heritage museum. So there's a little bit more detail. You can kind of see the areas that would be removed in the dotted outline, areas that would also be repaired to create kind of a better indication of how the farm would have been originally. So these are curtilage listed, and again, no harms have been identified from a heritage perspective when considering the kind of level of remains that are there and the proposed use as a heritage exhibit. Then no harms have been identified, and it is recommended that listed building consent be granted subject to conditions. Okay, so moving on to this one. Now, these last two applications, so agenda item 5E and 5F, are a planning application and an associated listed building consent application, so I won't repeat myself too much with the listed building consent because it considers the same things as this full application will, but I have just included them separately just so we're clear on the two separate applications. So this application considers the repair and conservation of historic fabric for Woodhouse Farm, so there's a number of elements here in terms of the conservation and the repair of what's there. And there would be the provision of toilets, baby changing facilities, and kind of upgraded facilities in terms of fire protection, means of access, and that is so that this Woodhouse Farm and the associated brew house can be utilised as a heritage exhibit and as more of a museum for the public to appreciate the Woodhouse Farm complex. So you can see that that forms this part of the site. So on the kind of southern edge there is Woodhouse Farmhouse itself, and then come to the north you've got pigsties, a brew house and a pump and well, so it considers quite a few different areas of the site here. So the farmhouse itself is 17th century, the brew house and the pump are 18th century, and then the pigsties are a slightly later addition in the 19th century. So just kind of give you an indication of how they look. So this is the farmhouse itself. As you can see, it's in a bit of a state of disrepair at the moment. It's not been used recently. It's all quite boarded up. And so this is it viewed from the public footpath, kind of adjacent to the feed barn. And just to the left there, you can see the brew house, which, due to its state of repair at the moment, the brew house is actually covered in kind of a steel framework to protect it from the elements. So again, this is looking from the kind of the brew house and the pigsties, looking back at the farmhouse. And you can see here, this is from the south, so you can see that brew house kind of covered up in a steel structure to the right-hand side. And again, you can see that brew house. So the proposals do seek to retain much of the original farmhouse from the exterior. Kind of the main things would be the repair of the render that's there at the moment, and providing step-free access as well to the frontage. There would be an area here, which you can see, which exposes the original timbers. Now, the Historic Buildings Consultant was consulted on part of this application, as it is a listed building, and they did raise concern over the exposure of these timbers, because it is quite a stark contrast to the render that's there at the moment, and would be quite an obvious difference to what's there. However, the subject to a condition concerning an interpretation board, which outlines why that's been exposed to show the evolution in the original construction of the building, then that would be acceptable from a heritage perspective. And here again you can see that this is the brew house, so obviously it looks quite different from the steel structure that's there at the moment, but internally there are a lot of surviving walls, and the roof would be replaced as necessary. So all of these together would form kind of one big heritage exhibition to show the farmstead as it would have been, and the evolution kind of through the centuries of the area. So as outlined, then the harms identified have been limited to that small section of exposed timber framing, which can be mitigated by the use of interpretation boards to justify that exposure, as there is a public benefit to kind of demonstrating the construction of this property. The proposals would secure an optimum viable use of the heritage assets, and the public benefit of the reinstatement of the buildings would outweigh that harm identified. So as outlined with the high barn as well, then this site would be accessed by the public, but on an arrangement basis, which would be organised by the owners kind of the Woodhouse Farm complex, and would utilise that car park as part of the waste management facility. So to summarise then, officers would recommend that planning permission be granted subject to conditions. And then again, just to summarise, this is the listed building consent part, so this considers the same works as that full application considered, again, to this area. And as outlined previously, there'd be a small level of harm from the exposure of the timbers, but as the proposal would see the optimum viable use of the site, and this can be mitigated through the use of interpretation boards, the works are considered to be acceptable, and the public benefit would outweigh that harm that's been identified. Therefore, officers recommend listed building consent be granted subject to conditions. Thank you.
Thank you, Fiona. Members, Councillor Abbott.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. When the saga of Rivenhall Airfield started, I was a young man. It's been going nearly 30 years. So I feel like I could almost write a book on it, but I won't keep members that long tonight because it's already 9. To start with, I think some of these are very straightforward and welcome, but there are a couple which are problematic, which I'll come on to. Basically, the Woodhouse Farm complex has become an island, a refuge in a sea of minerals extraction. The habitats for miles have been eviscerated, basically. What is described by even people who are advocates for what's going on there as a moonscape. And actually, those photographs, the aerial photographs which shown, aren't the most recent. It's more extensive even than that now. So Woodhouse Farm is really, really important, not just for the heritage, but also as a refuge for wildlife. Originally, when the first applications came in for the waste site, and before that, an application for an enormous landfill, actually, which was refused on appeal in the mid-1990s. Since then, a huge amount has been lost, including old World War II buildings as well, which had bats in them. Hedges and trees lost enormous amounts. I know we're not here to talk about the waste site. The waste site footprint included a woodland, part of which had been planted by Emin in World War II. That was destroyed. Now, these are all consents given by Essex County Council, so I'm at liberty to slightly beat them up. But one of the things I've said throughout is, well, what are you going to do to mitigate that? And I've suggested for decades that a building be put up which is for bats alone. So I'm very happy with 5A, because that's basically what that does. It's not exactly what I suggested originally. I suggested originally sort of timber frame, rather loose structure that bats like, a little bit higgledy-piggledy. But that's good. That goes some way to achieving what we said in the first place. I've actually been inside that cottage at the invitation of the ecologists for the developers, and I declined the invitation to go upstairs. She said, "Go upstairs, you're at your own risk," and I thought this could be a trap. So I didn't. The second application, 5B, again. Oh, I'll move the first one, by the way, Madam Chairman. Is that all right? Oh no, we can't. No, we've got to wait till everyone's spoken. I won't. No, I made that mistake last time. So I made that mistake last time. 5B again, not controversial. I think that's very straightforward. Yes, given that this area is now going to be brought into a commercial use, and there could be more people about, both employees and visitors, it's important that we separate out from the water feature of the moat. The fourth, if I come back to the third one, the fourth one, the feed barn, again, not a problem. Actually, not a lot left of it. It's basically almost destroyed down to ground level. So the refurbishment of something there plus some wildflowers, absolutely fine. Coming back to 5C, this is the one I think has got some concerns. So this is the community use building. Now, on the list of applications, every single one of these, and forgive me to the officer for this because I can imagine putting this together was difficult, but every single one says Woodhouse Farm Cottage, whereas of course they're not. They're Woodhouse Farm and the curtilage. If you look at the site map for the community use building, which is 5C, there's no access shown. Whereas for the map, I believe, for Woodhouse, the refurbishment of Woodhouse Farm, there is. So if we granted this tonight, we'd be granting access for the public to go somewhere with no approved access. Now, I believe the intention is for the access to come off Woodhouse Lane, and then up to the commercial car park, and then from there on in. But it's not actually shown. And I believe that was raised in the representations as well. So I don't know whether we can, if officers can guide us as to whether we can actually consent this tonight, given that no vehicle access is included in the site plan. But the wider concerns about this is that the Indava, who are the people who've taken over from Ghent Fairhead to develop the site, are very keen to get community use. But if it's going to be using Woodhouse Lane is also a public right-of-way. So Woodhouse Lane is the continuation of footpath 8 that goes back towards Rivenhall and Kelvedon, which means increased use of traffic along what is effectively a public right-of-way. And there's nothing, I know County have looked at this, and there's nothing in here to say, well, we're going to have additional signage to warn people there's a public right of way there. So I think that access point is very important. But also in the conditions on that, there's no lighting condition. Now, if that building is going to be used by the community, I would imagine it might well be used at dusk or maybe after dark. Given the crucial importance of this site for bats, which everyone acknowledges there is in the presentation included that, you would think that would include that. And ditto, finally, the Woodhouse Farm cottage. It says power's going to be supplied, but there's no lighting condition on that. Now that building, I don't know about now, because I mean that tin roof you saw, we had that put on. I was one of the people who requested that about 10, 15 years ago. The place I think would have fallen down by now had that tin roof not been put on there. I've been there at night, and you can stand on the public right of way, so we weren't doing anything we shouldn't, and watch bats flying in and out of that roof. So again, really important that there's a lighting condition on what would it be, 5E. I mean, ideally, no lights at all, but at least if there was some control over that. But so if I could request those two additional conditions, but also could the officer answer the question, please, about the access on 5C? Thank you very much.
Thank you. Yeah, so in terms of the access, I may defer to Chris on this a little bit, but it is within the blue line, and access is suggested to go from Woodhouse Lane and use that Indoor car park in association with that. Now, Essex County Council Highways and their public right-of-way team did have extensive discussions with the applicant in terms of the use of Woodhouse Lane, and they were satisfied based on the information given by the applicant in terms of vehicle numbers and use of the site that there wouldn't be a conflict with the public right-of-way that would be unacceptable in that regard. Just to pick up on your point about the lighting, then I think that's something that could definitely be added as a condition.
Okay, well, on that basis, Madam Chairman, I've got to wait for everyone.
Well, there might be nobody else who wants to speak, Councillor. Is there any other member who wants to speak? Well, I think you can move.
Right, all right then. On the basis of adding lighting conditions on, is it 5C and E? That's right. And belt and braces one, please, on this one. I'm happy to move all of those applications.
Do we need to do this? I think we're going to have to do each one, have a separate vote on each one. Is that right, separate vote on each one?
Apologies, Councillor Parker. Councillor, can I just clarify, when you mean belt and braces, you mean the standard, the beefed up standard wording for the lighting condition?
Yeah, so it covers all the points that we normally would, yeah.
Yeah, that's fine.
I think I'm thinking, Alison, I think we have to have a separate vote on each one. So would you like to move 5A?
Okay, 5A, yes, I'll move that.
Seconder for that, please. Councillor Spray. All those in favour of granting 5A? Any abstentions? Any against? No. Are you voting? Councillor Beavis, did you vote?
I did vote.
Oh, I didn't see it. Thank you. So that application has been granted. The next one is 5B, which is the fence. Councillor,
I'll move 5B.
Move that again. Second again, Councillor Spray. All those in favour? That has been granted. Now 5C, which is the steel barn and the lean-to. So we're going to move that
with the additional condition.
With the additional condition. A seconder, please. Councillor Spray again. All those in favour? It's granted. Then the next one is the feed barn, the listed building consent.
I'll move 5D.
5D. Second 5D. Councillor Spray again. All those in favour of granting 5D. Then 5E, which is the full permission for the farmhouse.
Move 5E with the additional condition.
With the additional condition. We need additional condition for that one, do you? Second. All those in favour of granting that one? Thank you, members. And finally, the list of building consent for the farmhouse.
Move 5F.
5F, thank you. Councillor Spray, second that. All those in favour? That's unanimous again. Thank you very much, members. Gosh, we rattled through that pretty quick. Finally, our last application this evening, which is application was item 5J, it's application number 23/01785, which is 114 Church Lane, Braintree, and Chris is going to do this presentation.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. This is an application for a single-storey rear extension and some installation of some decking at 114 Church Lane in Braintree. I should just say to members the reason this has been reported to committee is purely for probity reasons, as the applicant is a BDC employee. So I'll just take you through the plans. We have the location plan to start, an aerial image with the site edged in red, and some clearer plans coming up. So semi-detached dwelling, and this proposed block plan shows the addition to the rear. A couple of existing images. So at the moment there's kind of a wraparound extension to the back that goes around the side. That's proposed to be removed. Side view, so you can see there on the towards the rear, you can see the extent of the existing extension, and again from the other side. And in terms of what's there existing in terms of the ground floor plan. So in terms of what's proposed, as I said, the existing side rear would be removed and it would be replaced with a larger rear extension. So this shows its sort of depth, so which is 4 metres in depth, 5.6 metres in width, and just set off of the shared boundary with the adjacent property. In terms of elevations, rear elevation, so the main elevation of the extension, so you can see it's flat roof design, proposed to be constructed from brick with render, fenestration to match the existing dwelling, and just the side view and the other side, and then just a couple of photos. So from the front of the property, this just shows the existing structure to the side to be removed. Similarly, the existing rear to be removed, and then the relationship with the adjacent property, the adjoining property, and just a bit more of a close-up. So they already have an existing rear extension to the back. So in terms of key considerations, obviously principle is acceptable, subject to design, layout, and also impact on neighbouring amenity. I think the key thing here was the depth of the extension. Officers were, given the orientation of the property, there was a concern that there would be some impact on the adjacent property in terms of some loss of light and overshadowing, just purely because of the depth of the extension. But when you have regard to what could be built under permitted development, which would only be a metre shorter effectively, we don't consider that it would be so detrimental to warrant the refusal of planning permission. The design and layout of the development is in keeping, we feel, with the existing property. And while we accept there may be some impact on the adjoining neighbour, as I said, we consider that impact to be acceptable. So in that respect, it's recommended for approval here this evening, and happy to answer any questions, Madam Chairman.
Thank you, Chris. Councillor Ritchie.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. I won't drag this one out. This has come to us tonight purely through the virtue that the applicant is a member of the authority, as outlined by Chris. It meets all the policy standards. They did give some due care and attention around the overshadowing issue, but felt that it wasn't excessively overbearing. I won't add anything else at risk of moving the officer's recommendation.
Would anybody else like to comment on this? If not, would somebody like to second? Second, thank you, Councillor Abbott. So it's been moved by Councillor Ritchie and seconded by Councillor Abbott that we grant this application. All those in favour, please. That again is unanimous. That brings us to the end of our meeting. Thank you very much, members. We got through that quite quickly.